Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt, president and partner at Foundry, and I'm so excited you're here today because I have a legend with me, and I'm excited to be talking with him, and we're going to jump right in. But before I do, real quick, I do have to mention that we are hiring at Foundry, so foundrymakes.com/careers. Go and check it out. We're hiring for lots of different positions. Quick growing company. What are you going to do? We need people. Come and join us. It'd be great to have you. I want to jump right in and talk to my guest, Chris. Chris, how are you today? Thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being here. So tell me about the work you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, sure. That's a big scope. That's like asking who's your favorite band, you know? So I was going to say that, So we have, over the years, I basically create awareness without advertising. And what we mean by that is that we do digital branding for a variety of blue chips and new chips. So I like to think we've done a lot of work with some big brands, American Express, Ameriprise, Western Union. And then we've also had the pleasure of working with the world champion Minnesota Lynx, professional sports, as well as the United Way. We did a groundbreaking campaign for them. And then we've also worked with some really cool startups, specifically in the technology sector. Mm-hmm. And then we've also, we've had our shot at creating some stuff for beer, craft beer companies, the whole gamut.
That's right.
And I guess the main thing that we help people do is we like to think that you can create awareness without spending or giving away all your money to PPC, to the FANGs. And we like to say branding without big tech, and that happens to be in the zeitgeist right now. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of interest in our work.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chris, and that's where I wanted to start. Is that, how does this conversation go usually with these types of organizations? It seems kind of a no-brainer if you think about it, right? Which is, if you create advocacy with people, they're going to go out and talk about your company and your brand, and they're going to share a lot of the stuff themselves. But these older, and you mentioned blue chip companies, a lot of them are more traditional, and they've got sort of, the pay to play sort of approach to things. How does that conversation, over the years, how's that conversation has it changed for you? Are they more apt these days? Is this something you had to sell hard in the beginning to convince them that this was a real way to actually advertise?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it was close to impossible, to be honest. Not only with the agencies, advertising agencies were typically set up to do creative work that would garner awards. And I'm certainly not anti-awards. I tutored under a guy that was at Fallon for years. But the truth of the matter is that the advertising as brand advocacy was something that didn't get the traction that it needed until the sort of advent of not just Web 1.0, but 2.0. That's where you began to get the kind of conversation density out there with the social media platforms that slowly people began to see that if you're going to invest in advertising, if people are not talking about your brand, a brand without buzz is a brand without impact. So they began to equate impact with brand advocacy, and that's when our approach has always been that the purpose of an advertising campaign is to get talk value, is to become the genesis for powerful and positive conversations about your brand. Yeah. Now, there's always forces that are arrayed against achieving that. The most natural one is PPC, pay-per-click. What can I do on a short-term basis to show up my engagement or improve my CTR by 0.0%. But if you're really interested in creating a lifetime value of your consumer and sort of milking that LTVC for all it's worth, this is the kind of approach, frankly, that that I can empirically now validate with 20 to 30 case studies. I mean, I know you've read my stuff in the past, and I've done it for everybody. I mean, I've done it for supermarkets. I did it for Lunds and Byerly's, for example. It's a case like the Dina DeLucas of the Midwest, and and then I did it for a little town on the shores of Lake Minnetonka, Excelsior, and then I did it for Ameriprise. And then I did it for the Minnesota Lynx. I worked with the Minnesota Lynx when there were 1,500 women in the stands. And, 20 years later, they're, 4-time world champions. And it all had to do with creating this kind of work. If you're interested in running an omni-channel marketing campaign, so, really the way to get your value out of marketing is to run omni-channel, run, a variety of different channels. Essentially optimize your media mix in both paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And to do that, you really need a campaign that is not only something that people are going to talk about, but also something that has that sort of internal integrity or the legs to hold up, across all of those disciplines.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, Chris, is the whole idea of, and again, I'm not the expert like you are, but this whole idea of omni-channel, right? Because all the things that I read about in the book, the Awareness Without Advertising book that you wrote, you talk about all these things. It seems like a blend of all these areas that it's, in most organizations, it's all been separate things where it's been customer service, PR, marketing, all these different pieces that, traditionally seem to work independently, right? Of each other inside of an organization. Right. And this term omnichannel feels like it's kind of combining all those things, right? Because when I think of like building awareness without advertising, the first thing I thought of before I read the book was like, well, isn't this just PR? What's the difference?
Yeah. Right. Oh, what's the difference? Yeah. So PR, it's very interesting. I think that there's two kind of camps that are the most resistant to what we do.
Okay.
The first happens to be, believe it or not,
Let's talk about those.
Well, the first happens to be the digital marketing agencies. That's interesting. I mean, our digital marketing business has exploded because it's not, you can't. Once everybody has access to the same content, the quality of the content that you produce is one way you can differentiate yourself. Okay. The second is PR firms don't always love us because what we do is we generate an advertising campaign. So advertising materials that people want to talk about and share.
Yep.
So for example, classic example, I mean, every year there's something that we do, 2 or 3 times. I could use just an example. For example, the Minneapolis Public Library. They had invested $250,000 in design materials that where they had promoted them, and they were doing a PR tour with Lynn Bancroft, the famous explorer. And we said, people don't care about that stuff. What people care about is that libraries are apparently insignificant right now, and librarians themselves are boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, no, they're not. Librarians aren't boring. I looked up for my research and I found that Batgirl was a librarian. Chairman Mao had been a librarian. And of course, that got everything started. So all of these are powerful people, right? Yep. That had affected social change. And it just, the buzz value of that exploded.
Sure.
And I think that PR people don't think of it that way. They think of it in terms of it has to be some kind of serious news. Well, we all know that in the age of Kim Kardashian and, influencers and whatnot, that kind of pure church and state separation between news and buzz is a lot more, shall we say, it's more like a permeable wall now.
Yeah. Well, because you talk about in the book that this idea of brand advocacy is different than word of mouth. It's because people like to use the term word of mouth, right? Oh no, why will we get stuff through word of mouth, but it sounds like what you're saying is it's like word of mouth, but it's intentional.
Yes. Well, it's intentional. Exactly. And that is the key So I was talking with somebody at it was Jostens, and I suppose I can't name names, but there was a highly placed person there, and they were talking about, well, it sounds like what you're doing here is you are strategically generating talk value, meaning it's deliberate. And the issue that PR has always had is we can't guarantee that people will write about you.
Yeah, and we can't track it. We can't see the ROI.
That's right. And I can't guarantee that somebody's going to cover an advertising campaign, but I will say that it's not so much an advertising campaign as it's a story. And, there's multiple avenues to a story that people feel that they can participate in. And once they participate in this story, right, you really are creating a strategic approach to getting the word out about your product, brand, and service.
And so with that, then, where do you start with this, right? Let's say I'm a business owner or somebody I'm watching this. Is it something where you do maybe an audit of past things to find out what's worked in the past or what hasn't? Or do you start from greenfield, like from scratch, and you dissect things that they're currently doing?
Yeah, well, you said greenfield. That's interesting. The web loves evergreen content, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's what they want, and the reason why our work is successful as it is because it generates ample evergreen content. So the search engines and they love it because it's a new type of conversation. To get the process started, we offer a process called Focusclarion Dimension, and so the first thing that we do is we take a look at the brand. And we map the brand's relationship not to a selling proposition, which is a very classic way of looking at it, stronger, better, faster. We map the relationship of the brand promise to what we call the zeitgeist, or the kind of tempered spirit of the time, what's being talked about. And sometimes it's obvious what's being talked about, but frequently these zeitgeists are latent, or somebody hasn't attached themselves to the zeitgeist. And that was one of the things in my book, and this is proving to be even more prescient right now, with this kind of big tech taking over everything, and people feeling like they can succeed in spite of big tech. So what we do, we try to attach their message to a zeitgeist. I hope that's clear. Sometimes that sounds a little amorphous, but that's the first thing that we like to do. And then we take that sort of position and we test it against, we do persona and journey mapping as well. But what we do is we journey map for the story, not necessarily journey mapping the life cycle of the customer. Because what's interesting is that, the person frequently isn't thinking about this, or maybe they haven't injected this conversation into their, day-to-day activities.
Sure. Yep.
But once you get it, it's just, it just works like wildfire.
Well, and then, and one quick question, because I think it'd be helpful for people watching this, is that, does it matter if it's brand specific or a product specific? Where do you find the most success? Like, right, let's say I'm a General Mills and I'm going to bring in Chris to help me with Cheerios, or does it have to be an overarching sort of company approach? Because one of the things you call out in the book is that it's really easy to tell when something is inauthentic.
Absolutely.
And so if it is just product focus versus company, like how do you see that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it works for the brand when the brand we work with what we call emerging and re-emerging brands. And so it works really well for a re-emerging brand. For example, the United Way was a classic example. They had been on top for 30 years. They had fallen off their perch because Bono and everybody else was, doing, every celebrity had their private charity now. Nobody wanted to be part of their mother's or father's charity.
Yep.
So we repositioned the brand as a brand that where giving unites everybody. And we came up, Blondes and Brunettes United, Vikings, fans, Packers fans United. Big success, and that's where this Live United thing started. And Gray stole that from. Anyway, that little. I'm trying to inject some controversy in the podcast here. But anyway, but that was a brand, right? That was the kind of repositioning a brand. And we did the same thing, for example, when we work with American Express. This is an interesting example. There, we didn't need to reposition the brand. They had a great brand, but their 401k products were being marketed to people, living on golf courses about ready to die. Sorry,
Sure.
and so it's probably impolitic to say that, but I mean, it was very gray-haired. It was kind of a gray-haired approach, and we said that's ridiculous. People don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as happening, going out and making things, happen. And so, we worked with Judy Lawson and some other photographers to create this like super colorful kind of approach. It came up with the phrase "Now what," which Charles Schwab ended up using. But again, there's how you apply it to a brand. To a product.
Okay.
And it works particularly well for technology products. And especially software products. There was a brand we had worked with recently that was positioning their event. They had an EMS, event management software for large events. It was a lot of big brands, and they had talked about their product making events a little less eventful. Okay, no surprises, and we're like, that's not what's going on right now. The zeitgeist is all about data-driven marketing, right? And you want to be able to plot the life cycle of the customer, get as much data from them as you can. You're really not even marketing to people; you're marketing to data points. And so we completely reposition them, their core product to address that market. And sure enough,
in part of that, one of the other things you talk about in the book is, and I think this is a good segue. You talk about product market fit, right? And these companies using these big data and analytics to sort of pinpoint these things to kind of build the roadmap for them in a way, and sort of. But in your point, they're just kind of hitching their wagon to other ideas, and it's not something unique. Talk to me about the difference there.
Yeah, no, it's great. In fact, the primary competitor for our kind of brand positioning, although I don't really see it that way, is product market fit. And product market fit, of course, is the BJ Fogg type approach. Make little improvements until you can create a minimum viable product, and test it until you find something that works. Until you find that ideal product market fit. And in my book, I do actually give some really good examples of how that works. And I am not opposed to product market fit work. I've done it myself. But the fact is that product market fit generally is trying to focus on a product that's so good, that satisfies a need that's so prevalent that it will sell itself. And that is where it fails. Because especially with the competition for products out there, the product market fit work is critical for strategy. But as far as marketing, you really need to have something that's bigger than that, so that you can take that product and get people to talk about it. So that really is where the difference lies. Now, I will say additionally, I use that word omnichannel constantly. And what I like to do is I like to work with companies that are data obsessed, and when I talk about brand advocacy, I'm really trying to attach that brand advocacy to specific metrics that can be attached directly to a variety of different tactics in the omnichannel mix. So that for example, if you create Twitter, for example. Was famous for creating this follower functionality. People don't realize that anymore, but they did that through growth hacking their own customer base and finding that this happens to be something that people might want to do. Well, sure enough, it became it launched Twitter. It was cataclysmic, or I should say, it was sort of epochal for their growth, but once they identified that, then they also marketed to it. And it's not the kind of thing that people were interested in, or people were even thinking about marketing. See, that's what Steve Jobs was such a genius at. It was always like, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And I'm not trying to claim that I have that kind of prescient knowledge. But,
Sure.
But I will say that, we go a lot farther when we have a data-driven company that we're working with, and that have sort of internalized some of those skills. It's not. Product market fit really happens, way back in the very beginning of the process.
Okay. Well,
to make sure that you're not dealing with products that have no market.
Sure. Well, and that's a thing that I find with a lot of organizations is that they, to your point about being data driven, they might say they're data driven because they collect a ton of data,
right?
But they don't really do much with it. Is that something you've also found where you come in and you're like, oh, wow, there's a ton of data here. How are you using this to make decisions? Well, we got a ton of data, Chris.
No, I get it. In fact, just to that point, just today, a client was asking me about, they wanted to sign up for a special course through Sloan on business informatics. And I said, I've been through that process, and I can tell you that you're going to be deluged with a fire hose of data and information that you should track. But until you actually have your UZP, your marketing strategy, your product market fit mapped out, that data isn't going to help you much. It's just, if anything, it's going to confuse. It's going to confuse matters. Okay. Because I think the issue with data is that you're right. There's way too much data today. That's kind of a dull thing to say, but it's absolutely true. But data does not equal information, and information does not equal like outputs and success, specific achievement of sales goals. Because ultimately, that's all I care about. I mean, when clients work with us, we're on a timetable. We have to generate a return. And typically what we're asked to generate a return on is ROAS, return on advertising spend.
Yep.
And it's all about slicing and dicing their advertising. So their current advertising spend is almost inevitably greater than it needs to be. And why is that? Because, Google and everybody else are really good at showing them the data that would, that support the position that they need to advertise more.
Okay. And so the last thing I want to ask you about, Chris, is one thing you say in the book, and I really want you to help me understand, is you talk about the message being more important than the advocate themselves. Explain to me where that's coming from. No, I do my homework. I don't do that.
Yeah, and you are going right to the core concepts, right?
So tell me why that's important in your mind, Chris. Like why that's an important message to get across to people.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me give you 3 examples.
Okay.
And I like to teach by examples and talk by examples. So in the book I talk about the patron saint of the internet, Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian professor in the 60s that invented a phrase called "the message is a medium." Now that's coming into vogue again in Silicon Valley. The millennials have discovered him, and
it's like how to win friends and influence people. All of a sudden,
people are what a genius. He basically the global village. He basically presaged could see the internet, and the reason I use his example is because to this day, when I say the message is the medium. And if I put that online, I will get immediate conversation density. I will get immediate conversation value for that concept of the message is a medium, right?
Okay.
And not everybody remembers Marshall McLuhan, but they remember his message.
Yep.
Okay. And so I think it's almost important sometimes to disembody the message from the advocate. That's a kind of weird thing to say, but there's way too much focus on these stilted personas that are, just a target market. And we have great personas. I'm really proud of our personas, but the persona isn't necessarily going to guarantee that they're going to talk about your stuff.
Right. It's not the alpha and omega.
That's exactly it. And so McLuhan is an example, but another example of this is even in politics. I hate to use the example of politics, but if you look at some of these, successful politicians, they become associated with a particular position, right? And I use those red MAGA hats as another example. I know it's associated with a person, but it's also a message that has traction, that finds its adherents, for right or wrong. It sort of outlasts the particular advocate.
Right.
And that, frankly, is why brands need to, and specifically brands and products need to focus so much on their message. And because it is ultimately more important and it has more lasting value than any one advocate or persona.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, I think, but how do you know? And I guess it goes back to your testing, right? Because you could come up with something that you're like, this is the message. Have you seen where, and it's like a product, right? Like no product really survives its first impact with a customer. So is that the same with messaging? You have to put it out there and then shape it over time? Or do you put it out there and you're like, nope, I'm sticking with this till it becomes, just do it?
Well, that's really interesting. Again, we have a client, recently that the approach that we take is, so we take what we call minimum viable truth positioning.
Right.
We do just like an MVP. We test MBTs, and we test MBTs against potential advocates, and usually we can run a test against. Well, typically we run it against 3 to 5, depending upon the scope or the budget, and you can tell pretty quickly within the space of 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, I'm not talking about perfect information here.
Yep.
But you can tell rather quickly what message is going to have take up and what isn't. So that gives you a greater degree of certainty that you should then invest, bring all of your omnichannel tools to bear against a particular message. So we've gotten, I have that down to a science now. I mean, it's actually, some clients are just using us just to help them look at that.
Okay.
And I can understand why. I mean, and this goes back to this goes full circle back to the very first question that you asked me was, with traditional brand managers, is it easy to sell this, or what is the take up been, or what has been the acceptance of this? Well, now I have, ample empirical data to in effect prove, that this can work, and that you can also take a testable approach to it.
Right. That makes sense. Well, let's talk about the book real quick, Chris. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I want to share my screen. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, we're running a promotion on it right now too. So.
Yeah. So this is the book, Awareness Without Advertising. You can find it in all the places. Look at that. Look at, and Chris, you were saying you got a deal.
It's a great audiobook. Sorry to interrupt you. No,
it's good. And you got a deal going on right now, right?
Yeah. So if you go to awarenesswithoutadvertising.com, I feel like I'm on like the news channel. And you're going to shut the microphone off. That wasn't part of the plan.
It's QVC. It's QVC is what we're doing today.
Right. No, but at Awareness Without Advertising, you could download the 2019 edition in an ebook form. It's not the complete book, but it's all of the core work. It's about 50 pages, and it basically will give you 50 pages of everything that we've talked about, and it'll actually be a great complement to this conversation because you've been such a great student of the book. But I really do. I mean, the way you've gone to the questions right away, you're getting to
I appreciate that, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, and again,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of value in here. And again, back to your point about omni-channel, like a book like this, to me, I think works well, not just for people in marketing, but I think people in product teams should be looking at this book, people who are, people developing those products, founders, these types of people. It's not just a book for advertising folks or marketing folks. I think there's a lot of valuable information in here that transcends just kind of into what it means to build advocacy around your product or service or whatever you're doing. So I think it's extremely valuable. And so, yeah, no, I read it a few times.
That's great. Yeah. So that's a great, like I say, we've got you can download it. You get a little, I think I have a little video on it, but, and then that's a good way to just get in touch with me. Instead of just giving you my email, why not give you the book, right?
Yeah.
Why not give you something free?
That's right. Yeah. So if you go in the links, if you're watching this, you can go in the links below the description. There's links to awarenesswithoutadvertising.com, and you can check it out. And I definitely highly suggest you do, because if Chris is giving away some of the secret sauce for free, then I would definitely take him up on it.
Yeah. And the other thing is that people get in contact with me through this. I'm doing some new research. I've taken some classes at MIT recently, and I'm really looking at elements of that omni-channel mix that are most efficient at generating this kind of buzz without spending all the money on Google right now. I'm going to be releasing some new chapters in the next 3 months.
Good. Well, I'm excited to see them. Yeah, I think again, it's the model in it's the reason why I think it's really important and is because of the staying power of this type of work versus the kind of, throw to the wall, see if it sticks. Like you're saying, Google, Facebook advertising.
That's right.
This is where the money is saved, right? I mean, it's got staying power.
Absolutely. And people still talk about, and this is the funny thing is, I like to say people talk about it. Well, now I can say that bots talk about this. The bots don't forget anything. You end up increasing your digital footprint with this kind of approach. So in other words, you can sell into your own buzz this way.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I'm truly honored to have had some of your time. I really enjoy the book, and the work your company does is fantastic and amazing. And so I want to thank you for sharing with the audience and everybody. And so, so awarenesswithoutadvertising.com is where we should go. Anywhere else we should check out, Chris, while we're at it?
Well, my agency is ABdigital, and the URL is ABdbuzz. Everybody calls it AdBuzz, which is fine. And you can see some more case. I mean, I throw up new case studies there frequently. I think we have some of the stuff that we did for American Swedish Institute, which was really wonderful. So there's that, and then there's my LinkedIn, Chris Birt at LinkedIn. But the quickest way really is look at that awareness thing.
Awareness without advertising.
If you're looking at some of the case studies, ABdbuzz is a great place to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Kurt, and keep it buzzy.
I will. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time, your most valuable time out of the day today. And just as a quick reminder, after you're done with going to awarenesswithoutadvertising.com, check out foundrymakes.com/careers. We've got jobs for people to do. Yeah, I don't know why I'm singing. All right. Thank you so much. Make sure you hit the like button and make a comment and subscribe and things. I don't know, whatever people do these days. But we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.